This Torah class is brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.
Okay, Bruchim Haba, welcome everyone to tonight's share, the last share before Tisha B'Av. Mishenichnas Av, Mematin B'Simcha. Tonight's share is sponsored by Yedidi HaChashuv, Daniel Goldman, in honor of Rabbi Glatstein's birthday. Thank you so much. Thank you. I can't reveal more than that. Okay. Shkoyach Daniel, Shem Shvim Varach you and your family, Simchas Senachas, Tzur Service, Parnas B'Ravach, Ad B'Yaskol Tzadak. Okay, so Chazal tell us in the Mishnah Masechta Tainis, Mishenichnas Av Mematin B'Simcha. When the month of Av comes in, we diminish joy. Actually, there's a humorous remark. Don't laugh, it's Av, but some fathers are very makbid on this halacha. Mishenichnas Av mematin b'simcha. When they walk into the house, Mishenichnas Av mematin b'simcha. But instead, the father has to have a different custom. Menachem Av. The father comes in, he has to lift up the mishpacha, make the children feel better, make his wife feel better. Unfortunately, sometimes the father comes in and it's Mishenichnas Av mematin b'simcha. However, the Gemara comments on this. Rabbi Yehuda, brother of Shmuel bar Shilas, Mishmei de Rav. Rabbi Yehuda, in the name of Shmuel bar Shilas, in the name of Rav, said as follows: Kishem shemishenichnas Av mematin b'simcha, kach mishenichnas Adar marben b'simcha. Just like when the month of Av comes in, we diminish joy, so too when the month of Adar comes in, we increase joy. So these 2 months are polar opposites. Adar is a month of happiness, Av is a month of sadness. And what's the nafkamina? So the Gemara says very clearly, Amar Rav Papa. Rav Papa said, Hilkach, therefore, Bar Yisrael de Islay Dina Bahadei Nachri. If a Jew has a court case with a Gentile, you have a parking ticket, you have a moving violation, and you want to know when is the best time to schedule. L'shtamit minei ba'av. You should try to slip out of the case during the month of Av. Dereya Mazel, in the month of Av, your Mazel is bad, your Mazel is weak. It's not a good time to go for a court case. V'limtze navshe ba'adar, make yourself available, in other words, schedule it for the month of Adar. Why? Debari Mazel, your Mazel is strong. So here, the Gemara is introducing us to a concept that there are times in life that you have, so to speak, good Mazel, and there are times of life that you have, so to speak, bad Mazel. And this actually has ramifications. In other words, if you have something important and it's going to be decided, and you have to go to a judge, you have to go to an arbiter, not a good idea to go during the month of Av, but rather one should try to schedule it for the month of Adar. Now this topic was very intriguing to me. To what extent do we apply this lamaisa? Are there certain times in life that, now is a good time to build a house. Now is a good time to start a new enterprise, to start a new job, to look for a new opportunity. And are there times that are not good? In other words, do we really subscribe to this? Is this lamaisa, that now is not a good time to begin a new idea or a new venture, and other times are better? But let's digress for a moment. And when Chazal tell us when the month of Av comes in, we should diminish our joy, when exactly in Av does this apply? Does it apply to the whole month, part of the month? So comes the Magen Avram, and the Magen Avram says very interestingly that the din that you should avoid any court cases in Av is the entire month of Av. Ad Rosh Chodesh Elul, until Rosh Chodesh Elul. In other words, the whole month is a bad month. All your parking tickets, all your moving violations, if you need to speak to somebody, avoid doing it in the month of Av. Av is a bad time. Doesn't matter if it's after Tisha B'Av, doesn't matter if it's after Tu B'Av, it doesn't matter about anything. Shabbos Nachamu, it could be at your Shabbos Nachamu barbecue. It's still a bad time. In other words, if you're going to be deciding at your Shabbos Nachamu barbecue what to serve, though that's not a time to have a court case. The entire month of Av is out. However, we come across a Zohar HaKadosh, very interesting Zohar. And the Zohar basically says that the concept that Av is a bad month is not only because of the Churban, but actually there is a concept that Yaakov and Esav, who are twins, they each claim for themselves certain times of the year. In other words, the Zohar HaKadosh says in Parshas Yisrei that V'kula raza chada Yaakov natel beraza delay train Yarchin Nisan v'Iyar. Yaakov took 2 months, Nisan and Iyar, and he incorporated it in the secret of Sivan, because Yaakov is twins, Gemini, or something like that. Esav, on the other hand, he took 2 months. What are the 2 months of Esav? Tammuz and Av. And Esav is not found. Esav is lost. Elul does not belong to Esav. And even Av, says the Zayar, he only took 9 days. Esav only took 9 days of Av and not more. In other words, this idea that Esav owns Tammuz and Av, actually he owns more Tammuz than he owns Av. Tammuz he owns the whole month. Av he only owns the first 9 days. Presumably, based on the Zayar and possibly other factors, the Chai Adam disagrees with the Magen Avraham. And even though the Magen Avraham says the whole month of Av is bad, comes the Chai Adam mishenichnas Rosh Chodesh Av ein smeichin klal. Do not be happy at all. Okay? Don't rejoice at all. Don't be happy. Doesn't matter what's going on. You could go to a shiur and the Maggid makes a joke. Don't laugh. Stone face him. Doesn't matter how funny it is. Don't crack a smile. Or if you do, wear a mask so he doesn't see. Okay? In the month of Av, we're not happy at all. Get away from the guy, get away from any court case in the month of Av. But says the Chai Adam, if possible, bail out the whole month, like the Magen Avraham. But then the Chai Adam brings in Tisha B'Av. At the very least until after Tisha B'Av. And that's how the Mishnah Berurah paskins. In other words, the best advice is, Av is a bad month, but at the very least, the first 9 days are bad.
We do mitzvahs in the month of Av. You have to do a mitzvah.
Who's we? Me and you? Who's the... Oh, yeah.
So we have to do mitzvahs b'simcha.
True.
So how do you do that in Av?
It means, ein smeichin klal, other than doing mitzvahs. Obviously, when you're doing mitzvahs, you got to do it b'simcha, yeah. But you don't rejoice in any other fashion, okay?
You do serious mitzvahs.
Yeah.
Okay. But, so we have two opinions. The Magen Avraham sort of equates the entire month of Av. The whole month of Av is called Reya Mazel, bad Mazel. Mashen kin Chai Adam, and the Mishnah Berurah say only the first 9 days, and after that, we're doing good. What do you got for me? After that, you're doing good. After that, then ein smeichin b'chodesh Av. Okay, so we have these two shittas. We have the Magen Avraham and we have the Chai Adam Mishnah Berurah. Comes the Heilige Chassam Sofer, and the Chassam Sofer has a sort of an in-between view. Chassam Sofer says that if the Magen Avraham feels the whole month of Av is bad, that means the Magen Avraham is comparing Av to Elul. The same way the whole Adar is good, the whole Av is bad. How do we know the whole Adar is good? It says in the Megillah, the whole month of Adar is good. So therefore the whole month of Av is bad. But says the Heilige Chassam Sofer, Adar being good is not a raya that Av is bad. Why? Says the Chassam Sofer, the fact is the days before Purim are good because Purim is coming. And the days after Purim are good, says Chassam Sofer, because they're sandwiched in between Purim and Pesach. And this is as far we find in Shas that when you have days sandwiched in between Yom Tov, they're automatically good. Masha'en kain, the days after Tisha B'Av, what makes them bad? Who says just because the whole Adar is good, the whole Av is bad? The days after Purim are good because they're in the sandwich. But there's no sandwich in Av, and therefore, says Chassam Sofer, certainly after Tu B'Av, where Tu B'Av, we know the Gemara in Taina says, the Yom Tov comes and is mafsik, the Yagoin Va'anocha, says Chassam Sofer, V'nasu Yagoin Va'anocha. Therefore, says Chassam Sofer, this is the basis that Av is 2 months. There's Av and there's Menachem Av. And after Tisha B'Av is called a different month. It's called Menachem Av. So this week they came to me, they wanted to know when they bench Rosh Chodesh, should they say Rosh Chodesh Menachem Av? I said, Avada, no. There's no such thing as Rosh Chodesh Menachem Av. They said, what? Sam Sofer says Menachem Av does not start until the 9th, till the 10th. The first 9 days are not Menachem Av. It's just Chodesh Av. Rosh Chodesh Av Yeh B'Yom Haravi. So if they didn't do that in your shul, no, I didn't say that. That's very nice. What?
Where did he get that?
No, because basically Sam Sofer is saying that the days before Tisha B'Av are bad, because Tisha B'Av is coming, but once Tisha B'Av is over, so the month is good, and it's certainly after Tu B'Av. And says Sam Sofer, this is the basis that the month of Av has two names. It's 2 months. There's Av and there's Menachem Av. And Menachem Av begins after Tisha B'Av. It's not that we call the month of Av Menachem Av. It's a different month. There's Av and there's Menachem Av. Maybe there are other views. Anyway, the Chassam Sofer says another added dimension. This is something we've spoken about in the past, and actually we have a mimer on it in the humble work Magid Rakia on Purim, mimer Lametes. It's the second to last mimer on Purim. Thank you. That the Chassam Sofer says like this: the days after Purim, I'll tell you why they're good. Because when do you have to start learning Hilchos Pesach? The Chassam Sofer's opinion is not like the Mishnah Berurah. Mishnah Berurah says on Purim. Chassam Sofer says the day after Purim, but in any event it starts Av and Adar, and therefore the arms of Pesach are reaching out toward Purim and embracing Purim. Therefore all the days in between are good. But Masha'en Kain says Chassam Sofer after Tisha B'Av, it is not bad. Ze nira lefi ani azdaiti emes. This is the truth, that the whole month of Av is not bad, and if you have a court case, go get them after Tu B'Av and maybe even after Tisha B'Av. Okay, but this concept was very intriguing to me. This whole idea that there are times in life of Barei, Mazel, where you have good Mazel. There are times in life that Ra'i Mazel, you have bad Mazel. There are times in life that it's a good idea to pursue things, to start things, to invest, even financially. Should I buy stocks now? Should I trade stocks now? Should I start a new enterprise? There are times in life that are good times. There are times in life that are not good times. In fact, the Gemara in Tainus wants to know, how do we know the second Beis HaMikdash was destroyed on Tisha B'Av? There's no evidence to that historically. It doesn't say it, not in a Mishnah. It doesn't say nowhere. It doesn't say, we have no evidence that the second temple was destroyed on the 9th of Av. Says the Gemara, so why are we saying it was destroyed on the 9th of Av? The Gemara said, it had to be destroyed on the 9th of Av. Because once the first temple was destroyed on the 9th, and we don't know when the second temple was destroyed, it's 100% it happened on the 9th. There's no question. That's just the way it is. Even in presidents of the United States, it's like all the first presidents of the United States, they're gepeigert on July 4th. Come out, all the presidents. You know that?
No.
An uncanny number of presidents dropped dead on July 4th. Yeah, many of the early founding fathers. Even one of them, he almost died earlier, and then he survived, and then he died on July 4th. Yeah, that's a thing. Megalgalin, Zechus, Liyom Chayev. That's the way the world operates. They're good times, they're bad times. So I saw an interesting levush. We know that there's a custom to fast b'yom shemes b'avayim. That's the halacha in Shulchan Aruch, that one should fast on a Yahrzeit. Nowadays, people have a different custom. They bring in alcoholic beverages and ragalach. So there are different views on that. You know what Rav Moshe holds? Rav Moshe holds that you're allowed to eat in a shul. It's achilas rishus. Rav Moshe says, I'll bring you a raya, you're allowed to eat in a shul. Even though Lamaisa, the Ramban doesn't paskin this way, it's only Shitas Rashi. But Rav Moshe says the minhag ha'olam is to eat even rishus in a shul. Rav Moshe says the raya is from achila of a Yahrzeit. Says Rav Moshe, there is no mitzvah whatsoever by eating on a Yahrzeit. You're not being mezakeh anybody. In olam ha'emes, there's no aliyas neshama because you're imbibing alcoholic beverages. The neshama is not going up in shamayim. Guarantee you, says Rav Moshe.
Yeah, but you don't have to. I do the same thing. I bring it. I don't eat. I let the oilam eat.
So certainly the niftar is not having an aliyah because the oilam is imbibing alcoholic beverages. Even with the brachos and the kavanos, Rav Moshe says it's not a mitzvah. It's rishos.
In many establishing communities in France, they all do it, and night after Myra because of the time.
Yeah, because of the tightness. You have to fast on the yard. So what happened? Where did this come from?
Those people, other people don't have to fast. Only you have to fast.
Right. True. So where did this come from? So Rabbi Yaakov says, it used to be back in the day, people couldn't fast anymore. So what did they do? They made a siyum. And then you read the Sadairos, they can't make a siyum, but they could bring in ragalach. That's basically what Rabbi Yaakov says. That in other words, it's not a tikkun, it's a siyum. And the siyum is accompanied by food. Elamai, they can't fast and they can't make a siyum, but bringing in food you can make. But Lamaisa, by the Sfardim, they say there's an inyan of the brachos. Okay, be it as it's wonderful. What? I'm not Lithuanian. No one in my family is Lithuanian. Nobody I don't even have a third cousin who's Lithuanian. I'm just here to tell you, according to the Shulchan Aruch, you fast on the Yahrzeit. Why? The Lavush says a very interesting thing. He says, Shamati, because you have to do tshuva. Why do you have to do tshuva? Because on this day, a person has bad mazel. Why do you have bad mazel? Because the parent passed away on this day. And this day you got to watch out. You got to be very careful on such a day. That means the mishpacha has bad mazel on this day. In order to be mavatel, the force of the day, you fast. Therefore, the Levush says a chiddush lahalacha. Everybody knows that in Shana Rishayna, when is the Yahrzeit? If the Yom HaKvura is 2 days away from the Yom HaMisa, the Yahrzeit is on the Yom HaKvura, not on the Yom HaMisa, so that a person doesn't shortchange the Avelos, right? That's a well-known halacha. That even though year 2 and on, the Yahrzeit is on Yom HaMisa, year 1, the Yahrzeit is Yom HaKvura if it was moved away 2 days or more from the Misa. But says the Lavush, the Tainus is always on Yom HaMisa. Because the day of bad mazel is not the day the person's buried, it's the day that a person passed away. So here we see there's this concept. There are days on the calendar that a person has bad mazel. And then there are days on the calendar that a person has good mazel. Daniel, what day of the year does a person have good mazel? So the Ben Yehoyada famously says, then the Gemara in Brachos, on Daf... What? On Daf Chav Ches, go look at number 18. The Gemara says that on that day, Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah grew 18 rows of white hair. Says Ben Yehoyada, why does the Gemara say on that day? It should say at that Zman. What's on that day? Says Ben Yehoyada, in my opinion, the Gemara says it's that day to teach. You know why Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah had a miracle happen to him? Because it was his birthday. And on your birthday, nothing could stop you. You have strong mazel. Nobody could harm you on your birthday.
English or Yiddish, or both?
L'chaira both. For sure on the Jewish date, but you should know that the Lavush happens to hold that the solar date has significance even in the Jewish calendar. What does that mean? I'll tell you Chiddush Oyam B'Noira. Says the Lavush, what's Pshat in Hoshana Rabbah? Hoshana Rabbah is how many days after Yom Kippur? Hoshana Rabbah is Yom Kippur in the solar calendar. You hear this? Yom Kippur, 365 days later is Hoshana Rabbah. It's right because the solar calendar is 11 days longer than the lunar calendar. So Hoshana Rabbah is Yom Kippur. The reason why Hoshana Rabbah is a Yom Adin Me'ein Yom Kippur, because it is Yom Kippur in the realm of the solar calendar.
All the time?
Every year, yeah. Yeah, it's always 365 days after Yom Kippur. So that from here we see that even in the Jewish calendar there's a bechina of the solar calendar. So,
even if there's a leap year? And there's one extra.
I don't know. I don't know how it always works. That's an idea.
It's very close to leap year. It's the same year.
Not really. I don't know. Maybe you'll help me understand this. Even though, right, the Gemara says in Ma'ikatan, Ein Mazel Yisrael, but Tosfos says that means that really Yesh Mazel Yisrael, and you could be Mavatal it with a Zechus Gedoyla. So that means there is a concept. I mean, Ein Mazel Yisrael, but you still can't go to a court case in Av, Lahalacha. And Ein Mazel Yisrael, but still Lahalacha, you go to the court case in the month of Adar. So even though we don't hold of it, but it Lamaisa has ramifications. I want to tell you another interesting thing. Rav Tzadok HaKohen, okay, we're going to ask a personal question since we're all friends over here. Who here dreams? Who here has dreams? Reb Sender? So a few people voted that you have dreams. Okay?
I don't know if people know, but I are.
So Reb Tzadok HaKohen wrote a sefer about his dreams. Different chidushim that were niskal to him in his dreams. And one of the chidushim that was niskal to him in his dream is that on the day that a person was born, his mazel is strong. Ve'ein lo lira b'isayim b'chol shana mishum davar sheyura mazlai. You don't have to worry about anything on that day. Yes, Reb Tzadok, tzaddikim die on the day they were born. So how could you say you don't have to worry about anything on your birthday, but tzaddikim die on that day? Says Reb Tzadok, for tzaddikim to die, it's an aliyah. They take off their physical cloak and they put on their chalukah d'Rabbanan, the garb of the Rabbanan, a spiritual garment, and they have an elevation in Gan Eden, and therefore taka, tzaddikim don't have to, that's not considered a bad mazel. But for Rishonim anyway, they don't die on the day that they were born. It's a very interesting idea. So there are days in the year that are good days. There are days of the year that are bad days. There are times in life, and there's no escaping them. They're good times, and they're bad times. That was the name of the shiur. It was the best of times, it was the worst of times. What does that have to do with anything? Nothing really. That's just the name of the shiur. Okay? So,
besides Moshe Rabbeinu, who else died the same day he was born?
Who besides Moshe Rabbeinu, who else died on the same day he was born? David HaMelech. So, by the Levaya of Reb Chaim Volozhner, they said as follows. I once saw in a sefer, Bris Ephraim, that Reb Chaim Volozhner's Levaya, they gave the following hesped. Reb Chaim Volozhner was nifter 7 days after he was born. A week later. So they said like this. Chazal say that a person is not born until he has a bris milah. So Reb Chaim was really nifter on the day he was born because it was 7 days later. So he was nifter on the day that he was born spiritually through the bris.
Rabbi Gamaliel Rabinowitz says openly all the time that his birthday is the day of his bris. That's when he considers his birthday.
Really?
Yes.
Okay, so Reb Chaim Volozhner also, they said it at his Levaya. So they asked, so what's Pshat in Moshe Rabbeinu and David HaMelech? So then they weren't nifter on the day they were born. They were, because they were born mahol. So since they were born mahol, they were born circumcised, so they were nifter on the day. That's what they said at the Levaya of Reb Chaim Volozhner. Okay, so we have a Gemara Megillah, a very interesting Gemara. The Gemara says, this is Gemara Megillah Vav Amud Beis. He was nifter on.
He was nifty a gimel, but he was nifty a gimel. He said because he didn't want his family to celebrate Purim as a day of Avelis, so he asked a bunch of them to move it a day early.
Mm-hmm.
No, what? Moshe was nifter Chof Vov.
It
Was the other good gimel.
Okay. Back to the ranch over here. We have a Gemara Megillah Daf Vav Amud Beis. The Gemara says, Imro'isa Rasha Sha'asham Mesachek Eslai. If you see a bad guy, and he's living it up, he's a bad guy, he's a Rasha, he does bad things, he does Averos, and he's wealthy, and he's successful, and everything he touches turns to gold, don't start up with him. Avoid him, because it's his time in the sun. Not only that, the Gemara says he's being so successful, he could take someone to a bezdin and he could be dead wrong, and he could get 71 Gedolei Adar to paskin like him. That's a siyata d'shmaya he could have. And not only that, the Gemara says he will see the downfall of his enemies. So don't start up with the Rasha in his time of success. Frek the Gemara, Rabbi Yochanan said in the name of Rashbi, you're allowed to start up with the Rishon Ba'il Mazel. And the Gemara quotes a whole bunch of psukim. And if a person's going to say, well, it says in a pasuk, don't start up with the Rishon. Nah, you have a guilty conscience. You should start up with Rishon. You should fight them. You should instigate. You should attack them. So the Gemara gives 3 answers. Answer number 1 is it depends. Physical matters, earthly matters, don't start up with the Rasha. he's going to beat you. Spiritual matters, start up with him. You'll be able to overcome. The second answer the Gemara says is, it depends. If you're a quasi tzaddik, don't start up with him. If you're a tzaddik gamor, you could start up with him. Answers the Gemara in the third answer, you missed the whole boat. We're talking not about Stam Rasha, we're talking about a Rasha who's having his moment in the sun. You know that time, you see this guy, for some reason, God is smiling on him that day or that month or that year, stay away from him. He's having strong Mazel, stay away from the Rasha when he has this strong Mazel. So to me, this was another raya to the idea that there are times in life you can have a very bad person and he could start being very successful because at this time in life, Bari Mazle. Marv Rabbi Sai, I was very hesitant to give the shiur because it's hard to say definitively how do you put this concept into practice. What does it mean lamaisa? But I was very surprised. There's a comment of Rabbi Kiva Eger on this Gemara. Rabbi Kiva Eger brings a Magen Avram. Actually, let's hold that off for a moment. Look at number 13. The Magen Avram Paskins. There's an interesting Magen Avram you should be aware of. By the way, the Magen Avram was probably the poorest of any of the Kaisei Svarim of all time. The Magen Avram was so poor, he could not afford paper. He wrote part of the Magen Avram with coal from his oven. He wrote it on the walls of his house. Magen Avram in Sim Kuf Nun Vav brings down different hanhagos, toivos that are derived from the Gemara, and one of them is, look at number 13, Rasha Shahasham Misachekes Loi, a Rasha who he has his hour in the sun. Al Tizgaro, don't start up with him. When you see a Rasha as being successful, avoid him, stay away from him. Marv Rabbi Sai, this is unbelievable. Ayam V'Noira. So I went to Queens for the first time in, 4 months. So I went to my, go-to Sfarim store, and they're so happy to see me because they have all their Sfardi Sfarim sitting there on the shelf. Nobody bought them in 4 months. They needed me to come and buy them, so I was able to catch up on my Ben Ish Chai purchases. I took everything, all the new stuff, every week, new Sfarim come out from the Ben Ish Chai. So I got a set called Niflaim Ma'asecha. All the stories and all the writings of the Ben Ish Chai, and they have a little bibliography where it comes from. So I saw a story like 2 weeks ago, and I've been thinking about the story. I said, if I could ever get more information on this is a good shiur. And it said that the story is found in the Sefer Benayahu, Daf Yud Gimel Amud Beis. So I looked in Oitzar Chachma, it's not in Benayahu. I looked in HebrewBooks.org, it's not in... so it was in HebrewBooks.org. There's one edition of Benayahu that this appears. This is a very interesting story. Let's go to number 10. It's a Gemara in Brachos, the last page in Brachos. The Gemara says like this: Kol hadoichek es hasha, sha doich kasai. Anyone who pushes away the hour will push you. Kol hanidchem ibnei hash. Anyone who allows himself to be pushed away by the hour will be pushed away from him. You hear what it's saying? Basically, don't push the envelope. You want something, you want a job, you want a position, you want an opportunity, don't push it. Anyone who pushes it, it might push you away. Anyone who yields and defers, it will come to you. That's the Gemara. The Gemara gives an example, like Avshalom. Avshalom wanted to be the king. He could have waited. He pushed it. It ran away from him. The Gemara gives another example. Rabbah and Rav Yosef. Rabbah was what we call Oiker Harim. Rabbah was a very deep analytical thinker. Rav Yosef was a Sinai. Who's better, Sinai or Oiker Harim? The Gemara says Sinai is Adif. It's better to know a lot of information than it is to be deep and analytical. Some Achronim say this doesn't apply anymore, because nowadays that everything is written, it's not no Groise Gedil to be a Baki, it's more important to be an Amkin. Rabbi Vadia Taka says, even Bezman Hazeh, it's better to be a Sinai. Famously, right, so the Gemara says Sinai is better than Oiker Harim. Sinai is someone who knows Har Sinai, he knows Kol HaTorah Kula. Oiker Harim is someone who could deep penetrating analysis. Sinai is Bekias, Oiker Harim is Eon. Okay? Rav Pinchas Hirschsprung would say humorously that how in the world could Sinai be better than Oiker Harim? Sinai is a mountain. Let the Oiker Harim come along and uproot the Sinai. In other words, how can you say Sinai is greater? Oiker Harim is an uprooter of mountains. So let Oiker Harim come and uproot Sinai. So he would say humorously that Oiker Harim is looking all over for Sinai, but he doesn't have the Bekias to find him. He can't find where Sinai is hanging out. Okay. But, so the Gemara says that they sent, the conclusion is, Sinai is better. So now a job in the yeshiva opened up. Who's going to be the next Rosh Yeshiva? Presumably it should be Rabbi Yosef, because Rabbi Yosef was a Sinai. Rabbi Yosef let Rabbah take the job, because he heard from a stargazer he's only going to rule for 2 years. So Rabbah ruled for 22 years, and then for 20 years. And then Rabbi Yosef ruled for 2 years, and he saved himself. He lived 20 extra years, because instead of being the Rosh Yeshiva first, and then he would have had to die, he let Rabbah be the Rosh Yeshiva for 20 years, and he extended his life by 20 years. So in other words, don't push yourself. Someone who pushes himself in, the hour will push him away. You push your time slot, then you might never get it. You defer, you yield, it will come to you. Comes the holy Ben Ish Chai in the Sefer Benayahu, and he says, this is not just advice for Rosh Yeshiva, for Rabbanim, for people who want position. This is financial advice. You ready for the story? Maisa Shahaya Kachaya. You ready for the story, Yonatan? I thought so. The story is like this. 2 brothers inherited their father. They both inherited $1 million. And they're living it up. They have a lot of money. Actually, nowadays, what do you do with $1 million? Right? So they inherited $100 million. And they're living it up. And they're investing, and they're being very successful, and they're living like Shiurim Gedolim. And then, after about 5 years, they both start investing, each one in a different geschäft, and they start losing. And they both lost about 90% of their money. So one brother, Ruvain, says, that's it, I only have 10% of my money left, I only have $10 million. He starts investing it and pushing it, and he diversifies, and he's not letting go, he's not letting up, and he figures if I diversify, even if I lose here, I'll make it over there. He loses all his money. He borrows money to invest. He goes into debt. The other brother says, look, it's not the right time. He takes his $10 million, he buries it under the ground. He takes his furniture, he sells it. He takes his wife's jewelry, he sells it. He gets a job, he drives car service, and he makes a few bucks, and just enough to eat. And he drives the car service for about 5 years. He's making $35,000 a year, and then one day he drives Oisher and he gives him a tip. The Oisher gives him a $100,000 tip. And then he's walking home and he finds a $50,000 ring, and then he buys this fur coat and he finds in it a diamond, and he says, 3 good things happened to me in a row. My Mazel has changed, and he starts investing, and he becomes an Oisher Muflag, and the story ends happily ever after. Says the Ben Ish Chai, this is an example of someone who pushes the hour. He sees it's not a good time, it's not a good moment. He sees his Mazel is not strong. He pushes, the time will push him out. But someone who recognizes it's not an opportune time, he sort of sits back, he waits for the opportune moment, he will be successful. And honestly, I looked at this Ben Ish Chai and I thought to myself, do we follow this? Do we subscribe to this? Is this a real principle? Is this a real concept? Comes the Magen Avram! The Magen Avram paskins like this lahalacha. In the same, that Rabbi Kiva Eger on the Gemara, Kal Adoichek Es Hasha, quotes the Magen Avram in Siman Kuf Nun Vav. The Magen Avram paskins, Kal Adoichek Es Hasha, Shah Doich Kasai, V'chal Nidcha B'mnei Hasha, Shah Nidcha Mipanav. Marv Rabbi, I'll tell you another Gemara. It's a Gemara in Rosh Hashanah. The Gemara says that when does Hashem judge the grain? Hashem judges the grain on Pesach. So the Gemara says, what does it mean Hashem judges the grain on Pesach? So the Gemara says On this Pesach, Hashem judges whatever will happen to the grain from here on on. And then the next Pesach, Hashem will judge whatever happens to the grain from here on on. Omar Abaye! If you plant grain, and you see the grain is like taken off, chap a rind and plant more grain while the iron is hot. That means you got a good din on that Rosh Hashanah. Take advantage of the strike while the iron is hot. Don't wait to plant again after Pesach, because after Pesach there's going to be a new din. This year you have good Mazel. Plant more. Amar Abaye hilkach ki chazi inish the mitzlach zara afla. When you see your fast-growing grain is successful, liktim velizra charfa. Advance and plant the late-growing grain. Get it in before the new din. I'm going to tell you another maramakai, mamish oyam v'noira, a Ralbag. The Navi Shmuel tells us there's a man by the name of David HaMelech. Raise your hand if you heard of David HaMelech. Very good. And David HaMelech became the king of Israel. David Melech Yisrael. And he wants to build the temple, so Hiram sends him materials and sends him cedar and wood and stones. And the pasuk says in Shmuel Beis, Parakeh, pasuk Yud Beis, number 15. Vayeda David ki hachina Hashem l'malchal Yisrael. David saw God is grooming him to be the king. V'chinise mamlachta, and God's raising him up. Avor Amo Yisrael. So what does David do? Vayikach David oid pilagshim. David took more concubines. You hear this from Sender? David took more concubines. He married more people. V'noshim. More than he had before. L'chayr, not more than 18. More than he had before. David married more wives. That's the story in the Navi. You know what Navi is? Navi are the prophets who gave prophecy to the Jewish people, right? Torah Shebechsav, Sefer Shmuel. Sefer Shmuel, it says, when David realized that God had solidified his Malucha, he married more women and had more children. Says the Ralbag was a Rishon, and he wrote a Perush on Tanakh, and in his Perush he is Meva'er in Yonim, and then he says all the benefits that we learn from the various episodes. He calls them Toyaliyos. Says the Ralbag, the Toyeles of this account is if a person sees that he's having a bout of success. He sees things are going well for him. Things are good in his job. He sees whatever he touches is turning to gold this month. Chap a rind and try to do as much as you can and get involved in as much as you can during that tekufa, because you have a strong mazel at that time. David HaMelech realized Hashem was solidifying his melucha. Hashem was giving him success. David said, you know what? Maybe the children I had before won't be ra'oi to be my successors, but if I marry more women now, maybe the children I have now will be even more successful. So David married more pilagshim and more nashim, says Rabag, and in fact, who was born to David now during this later tekufa when his melucha was solidified? None other than Shlomo HaMelech. Says Rabag, this is teaching you a lesson lemaisa. The lesson is strike while the iron is hot.
Yeah, but of all his kids, there was only one that was royal.
Look, you're not going to hit jackpot every time.
No, it's a very small percentage. Only one out of whatever he had.
But he hit it. Shlomo HaMelech. So we do have a few. Yes.
So what if that time is during Av? What if the time where everything seems to be going really well, even according to the Magen Avraham?
Okay, so then you have to evaluate. But the point is that this is a conceptual point. How you put it into Lamaisa, that is a very difficult question. There are months in life, Ra'i Mazle, person has bad Mazle. There's a month of Av. There's a month of Adar. There's something in life, there's a Yahrzeit. It's Ra'i Mazle. There's a birthday. The Mazel is strong. You have years, you're successful financially. You want to know, should I invest? Invest at that time. Invest in Adar. I'm not saying, I'm not giving you anybody financial advice. I'm saying there's a principle. How to apply that principle, Lamaisa, that's a very difficult thing to know. But there is such a legitimate principle that there are times, what is this called, Rabbi Sai? If you look at number 17, Rabbeinu Tam, and the Stipler refers to this, Rabbeinu Tam, and other Rishonim use this terminology. There are times of life called Yemei Ahava, and there are times of life called Yemei Sinah. And that's basically a terminology for good days and bad days. This is terminology for good moods and bad moods. There are times in life where you're hitting on all cylinders. You wake up in the morning and you're able to jump out of bed and get out of the house quickly. You're in Shachris 10 minutes early, and somehow you got home and you're able to have a good breakfast, and it's still early in the day, and you catch your ride, and everything's working for you. And then there are other days you get out of bed and you stub your toe, and you're running late to Shachris, and on the way to Shachris your umbrella turns inside out, so you get soaked, and then on the way home the car drives by and in the puddle, and you come home all full of mud, and just when you walk in your kid spills your coffee all over you, onto everything you have, and those days. They're Yemei Ahava and Yemei Sinah. It seems like in life these are all inevitable. This is the verdict of life. Life has its ups, life has its downs. They're good months, they're bad months. Says Rabbeinu Tam, the key to life is to realize everyone has these down times, and it turns. And the Rebbe Shem is of Harachaman and cares for us more than anybody else, and will turn it around for us, and will shower us with good days and good months and times of success. But that's just the reality of life. There are good days and bad days. Times when the Mazel is strong, and times when the Mazel is not strong. Once we've been learning all the various Gemaras that we learned in Daf HaShavua, I'll tell you one more. We had a Gemara in Chagiga. Remember the Gemara in Chagiga on Daf Daled Amud Beis? The Gemara said that Rabbi Yosef would cry when he would get to the following pasuk. The pasuk says, "V'yesh nispa b'loi mishpat." Sometimes Malchamavas takes somebody away, and it's not the time. So the Gemara tells a story. Rav Bibi Bar Abaye used to hang out with the Malchamavas, and can't explain why, I'm not sure. And one day the Malach HaMavah says, "Hey, bring me Miriam the Sheito Macher." And the Malach HaMavah, some there was confusion, and they brought Miriam the kindergarten Mora. And the Malach HaMavah said, "Wrong Miriam, what are you doing?" So he said, "Well, you want me to send her back?" Malach HaMavah, once we have her, we'll keep her. So Rabbi Yosef says, "How'd you do that? It wasn't her time to go." Malach HaMavah says, "Very simple. She was doing something in the oven, and she dropped the fire on her foot, and Reya Mazel, her Mazel was weakened. Once her Mazel weakened, I just got her." So you see, there's this concept. There are times when your Mazel is strong. There are times when Mazel is not strong. Now, Yossi pointed out, Chazal say, "Ein Mazel Yisrael." The Jewish people don't have Mazel, but Tosfos explains that means that we are able to break the Mazel. In other words, let a person never think, "Okay, I'm down in the dumps, and I'm just going to have to wait to get out of it." You could do something about it. You could. There are zechuyos gedolos that could break the Mazel. The Chassam Sofer happens to reveal what is the zechus gadol that could break a person's Mazel, and that is the midah of shalom. The Chassam Sofer quotes a pasuk. Hanoisen gevulech shalom chelev chitim yaspiech. Hasam, thank you. Hasam gevulech shalom chelev chitim yaspiech. One who places their boundary as shalom, he will be satiated with a lot of bounty. Explains the Chassam Sofer. There are a lot of people that have boundaries in life. They'll do anything, but at a certain point they say, "Oh, no, that I can't do." Some people say, "I'll do anything, but not if it's going to hurt my friend, not if it's going to hurt my wife, not if it's going to hurt my father." There are people who would do the right thing, but then there's a boundary. But somebody who is going to do the right thing, but when it comes to shalom, he says, "That's it. I'm going to do the right thing, but I'm not going to insist on my way if it's going to cause machlokes." That is the zechus, says Chassam Sofer, that could overcome a person's mazel. But Rabbi said, this is the time of the year that we're in. We call it Chodesh Yimtza'unha. We learned it in last week's Haftarah, as Abarbanel says, that somehow bad things find their way of happening during this month of the year. But we hope, as Chassam Sofer points out, it's only a short time. It's only 9 days. And then after that, things turn around into a new month. Yes?
The Av, is that right? So like we're like Av, this month, like Rav Meir, or?
Grada, we happen to speak about that. That there is a connection between the month of Av and the fact that the Gemara by the Churban mentions Rav Meir. But that's the Yahrzeit. The Yahrzeit is there are ups and downs in life. That is a feature of life. There's no escaping it. And as Rabbeinu Tam says, recognizing you just have to ride the waves. You ride the waves, ultimately the waves will carry you up. Rabbi Say, this year the plan for Shavuos, Tisha B'Av, good point, is Kiragil. Shachris is 9 o'clock, but it's going to be somewhat of an abbreviated program this year because of the matzav with the masks. But say we'll go to about 11:30. Of course, everyone could continue the kinnis on their own, but we're going to try to have a program a little bit shorter than usual. Okay, Rabbi Say, have a good night. Shkoyach.
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.